Hello, and welcome to the Student Ministry Conversations podcast with your hosts, Russell Martin and Brent Aiken. This podcast is all about equipping, encouraging, and inspiring youth pastors weekly with topics that are brought to the table by youth pastors from all over the world. And now, here's your host for this week, Brent Aiken. Hey guys, welcome back to the Student Ministry Conversations podcast. I am one of your hosts, Brent Aiken, and today I am sitting down with Ty Lust. And so I've known Ty for a little while now, but I'm going to let him kind of tell us about who he is and what he does now. So Ty, the floor is yours.
Awesome. Yeah. So my name is Ty Lust. I'm from Abernathy, Texas, originally, which is where I was blessed to meet Brent a hot minute ago. Yeah, I'll just say he's older than me. He was my youth pastor, but not by that much older. Grew up, went to Texas Tech University. And felt called to ministry and have jumped into some internship programs there, and now in Midland, Texas, where I'm the youth ministry director at First Methodist, and have been here for almost 5 years, and in ministry, including intern time, almost 9, which is wild. So, yeah.
I feel old now. It does not seem like it's been that long. Cool, man. What else? If obviously you are married, I do know that. So if you want
to, I am. Yeah. So I've been married to my beautiful wife Brooke for almost 6 years, and then back in September, so almost a year ago, we had our first son. His name is Nathan, and so that has been an adventure learning how to be a father and have a baby. And he's getting to the fun and terrifying point right now, where he's like, "Hey, look, I'm able to crawl and pull up on things and hold myself up, but also to fall really hard on my face on every hard surface in your house." So yeah, it's great times.
Freedom and scary at the same time.
Yeah.
So, well, cool. Yeah. And so today we're talking about student ministry, but specifically student leadership. And this is actually the third time that we've had this conversation, but same with what we've said on the last two. We feel like this is one of those dynamics that can be taught on or talked about 100 times over, and everybody's going to have different input and thoughts on how and why and when to do student leadership. And so we're going to put the show notes, put the other 2 episodes in the show notes for the first 2 student leadership topic conversations. So you can go back and listen to those. And then you can also listen to today's. And by now, hopefully we're making a little bit of a well-rounded effort towards student leadership. So, but with that, my first question for you is, what would be your first step to finding students that will rise up as leaders?
Yeah, the first thing that I would say is keep your eyes and ears open, because they already exist. One of the things that I have seen over the last few years, but have just started to figure out what that looks like ministry specifically, is that your ministry has leaders. The question is, are they leaders who are leading in a capacity that you have given them or you have equipped them for? Or are they leaders because they're popular or because they're who people look up to? And so I think being able to keep eyes and ears open and say, okay, as I am in a conversation, so a quick example for me this year was when I'm in junior high boys discipleship groups, and a 7th grader laughs at the joke of another kid, but then says, "That was a good one, let's focus in," and redirects an entire room back to the leader. I'm like, that's a leader. Like that moment there
no
was
doubt.
Not something I had equipped him for, right? It was not something that I had asked him to do. But in that moment was like, I see that, I know that, where are we going with that? So I think the first thing is just really keep your eyes and ears open and be able to see who's there. And then you can go from there. But I think they exist already. I don't think you have to create leaders. I think you just have to figure out what to do with them. So
well, and that leads to an interesting question on my side. You talked about how the junior hire, getting the entire group back on track. I would assume that you might have had experience with that, but also I'm also curious to see what would be your other things that you've seen where you're just like, oh man, that kid's a leader. What are some other examples that you have?
Yeah. So on the flip side, and I think we can definitely get more into this as we go on into our conversation today. But I think one of the things that is required for you to say this is a leader in my ministry is the ministry part, and the fact that hey, they have a relationship with God and are seeking to do good things. So a different example of that would be whenever you say, hey, I planned this thing and that's really great, and then you have that one high school boy who goes, this sucks, and because of his leadership capability and the way that he's followed, everyone goes, you're right, whether it sucked or not. And so that's the scary part within that is you have leaders, and sometimes those flow really naturally, right? Like we don't, our expectation for seventh grade boys is not perfect focus in discipleship. So you have the great stories, but I think on the flip side, you have the others that are on the other side, and then everything in between. And obviously, you get personality types with that too. And so you're going to get students who do that boldly, right? And who are really jumping into situations, really going hard in that. You have others that all of a sudden you've heard from two kids. This happened this year. Like, oh yeah, she prayed with me about that, and that was really, really great. Well, I had no context that that student like would have done that, but all of a sudden started realizing, hey, this student not only has a prayer life that's really good and I didn't know about, but all of a sudden they are stepping in an intercessory way to these other high school girls and having these conversations that I'm not leading. And so again, that can be behind the scenes, it can be forward, it can be perfectly the way Jesus wanted it to, it can be doing things that they're not supposed to do. All of those have leader roles, I think, across the board. So
Yeah, I know. I really like how you said that sometimes it doesn't work to our advantage too. I think
yeah.
that's a really, really sometimes you have to almost go after the leaders that are an influence the other way,
Mhm.
and really, really strive to kind of get them plugged in as well, because they already have the influence. They already have the desire of like being in front of people and everything like that. And sometimes you just have to coach them in the correct way of using that influence. So that's a really, really good um, kind of thought. I hadn't really thought about that when we were going to talk today, but it kind of also leads into, I guess, the next question, which is how can youth pastors work on developing student leaders? You kind of just said, hey, like, I see the potential, or hey, they're going to be a problem if I don't um, get them involved there because of the crowd that they sway and everything like that. So once you see that talent, do you have a process of how you work through with your leaders?
I think for me, and this is probably going to come out a lot in the things that I talk about today. I am very relational. I am working to be more systematic and structured and have all the right formats and things for the way that we do ministry. That's a growth point for me. But the thing that I've been pretty natural at since the beginning of this is, hey, I want to know who you are. I want to know what matters to you. I want to build a relationship with you and help you where you're going. And so most of mine has been that process. That when I see the potential in those students, when I see maybe the abilities or the things that the giftings that God has already given in them, just making sure, and not that we shouldn't do this for all, but making sure that for those students that I'm saying, hey, I am so glad and I see this in you. So I'm creating an affirmation point on the front end, because some kids don't know they're doing it. I'm like, hey, I see this in you and that's really great. And they're like, everybody does that. I'm like, actually, they don't. But so creating an affirmation process, but then just engaging relationally with them to say, hey, I appreciate that you're coming to youth, right? You're making a choice to be here, and allow me to pour into you and allow our ministry to do these things. You, I think, have a role in our ministry as well. That this can be both sides, where you not only can come and this be for you, but I think you being here can be for what God wants to do, and then just seeing where that gifting goes. And so I think in my ministry in the last few years, some of that has been on the worship side of things. So we have a youth worship team that is really good. And for context, I can only drum. So like I'm a drummer, and that's all I do. And I lead a worship team, which tells you how talented all the students have to be for the drummer to be in charge. Because I don't play any other things. And so some of it's in that. Some of it is them being able to step into just looking out for that kid. So being able to have somebody who's really great relationally with other kids, and me saying, hey, I see this in you. One of the things that I want you to do and I'm asking you to do is to, anytime there's a new kid or a kid that fills out, help be that for me. And it's not just to fill a role. I think student leadership in discipleship moves beyond filling roles. But to be honest, I don't feel bad when it works that way too. When there's things that need to happen and kids just do that well, I'm glad to see that, and I'm excited to equip them in that. So
Sure. And it's almost not necessarily like an introductory level by any means, but you do have to make sure that the heart is there first.
yeah, 100%.
And sometimes the heart, uh, I had a student one time that came to me and they were like, I really want to teach. And I'm like, that's awesome. Like super, super glad. Like, I'm gonna get you started in the junior high. And they were like, no, like I want to teach high school. And I'm like, but you're in high school.
Yeah.
And it was just one of those things that was like, they could not get past the idea of like, they wanted to serve exactly where and exactly how they wanted to. And I was like, that's not serving. That's just doing what you want to do.
Yeah, no, 100%, 100%.
But it does bring up interesting dynamics because the thing is, especially in your, it sounds like in your worship team, you have to have a lot of trust. But then also sometimes you just have to kind of be like, hey, this is yours, run with it. And kind of give them the freedom of taking risks, taking challenges, and going with it. And especially in a worship situation where you're the drummer and not the person in charge or person leading, it can very, very much be a difficult task. So it involves a lot of trust and a lot of confidence in your group.
Yeah, and it's not a perfect system, and a lot of it will depend on your personality. But I am a flexible enough personality where I know, okay, we need two songs, we need this style of song, we need this style of song, or I mean that's an example. But so here's what the plan is, but I don't know what key we're gonna be in until the day before because I had to text a student to figure out the key, and I don't know these kind of things. But then them being engaged in that process, or them being able to text me and say, hey, three of us had a conversation about this song, would it fit this week? And being able to create a relationship that way where they know it's not, Ty, we're doing this song, deal with it, right? Like I'm still in charge, I still and in that, but where they know like, hey, I have a voice and I have an opportunity, and wherever we're going for the week, whatever we're doing, if this fits, like I can say that, like I have freedom and a voice to do that. And that takes time. But for me, I'm flexible enough and good enough with the changes, and when we screw up the key, to change the key and all the things, to own kind of that middle ground for sure.
Yeah, definitely. And so, this is another question that we kind of ask everybody as far as the three that we've done student leadership with. Do you specifically have an age for student leadership? Do you do just high school, or do you allow junior high to be in that as well? How does your kind of involvement with that happen?
Yeah. So I think for students to have leadership roles. So if we say, okay, we have a like job description role that we want a student to fill, that is only high school for me. So for instance, we had a student last year who was going into her junior year, so I guess last summer, and came to me and said, hey, our junior high girls discipleship group has a great leader, but has had like 7 different co-leaders over the last year. Would I be able to step into that role? Could I have a conversation about co-leading that group? I knew her heart. I knew who she was, what she was about. And so I said, hey, let's bring that other leader in. Let's have a conversation about what that would look like, and let's see. And it has thrived. She's doing it again this year, senior year. It's awesome. And so I think I would typically do high school for a structured leadership role. The person who is leading the song in the band, right? The person who is running back of house. So I have almost all, if not all, students running all of my media, sound, stuff like that. And so I think all of that, high school gets important for them to be able to have those job descriptions. But I think really the opportunities for all that to starts in the junior high side and starts in the younger side. Being able to do the noticing that we were talking about, being able to give the affirmation, give the kind of create that culture of dual purpose, right? That I'm coming to youth not just because it's for me, but because I have an opportunity to do something. I think that part happens on the junior high side. And so that's how I would typically run that. is you wouldn't have maybe authority, if that makes sense, until high school. And even that can get dangerous. But that even in junior high, you're understanding an investment that maybe is beyond just showing up. So
Sure. Yeah. And we definitely kind of gear ours off the same mindset where if it's a big position like worship team or anything like that, we don't allow junior high, but it's something for them to look forward to.
yeah,
And we have a lot of junior high that are jumping the gun, like ready to like showcase like what they have and like use that as an opportunity to serve when they hit high school. And it builds a lot of energy and excitement for getting into high school. But with junior high, there's a lot of more. We'll just be like, hey, love your heart, love your energy. You are going to say hi to every single person that walks through that door. And
yeah,
junior high, I mean, of course, they're just like, yeah, like they take it and they run with it because I mean, they have energy and they want to be involved. And the thing is, you can give junior high a small task,
yeah,
whether that be make sure that the Bibles are all out, and they're going to run with it because they love having that responsibility. In high school, you kind of get into high school, and then high school is like responsibility. Do I want that? Like,
yeah,
but junior high is still craving like that opportunity to be a part of a team or be responsible for stuff. And so there's tons of different opportunities that you can do with that. And
yeah.
I totally agree. It's a fantastic method. And the thing is you see, I would say that there's multiple levels of leaders. And you can kind of see who's going to rise to the occasion in junior high before they get to high school and start doing the crazy big um, jobs of the program.
Yeah, it's super stereotypical, but the junior high kid who's stacking chairs will be a great high school leader. And I know that's the like biggest youth ministry cliche of all time, but yeah, like having those students who are asking what needs to be done at the end of the time, having those students who, if I say I need a volunteer, are there. Yeah, doesn't mean they're ready to step into a full time, a full role, but it means that they're on the way. So.
Yeah, definitely. So, especially with that, the solidified, like you actually have a job description, everything rolls for high school. What benefits can leadership bring to a high school student?
Yeah, so I think, and if you're good with it, I'm actually going to say benefits and maybe like I said benefits and opportunities, meaning not a
Sure.
con, but a place where it could go wrong. So I think the front end is really confidence that God is using them. I think whenever you say, "Hey, you have stepped into a role that has a description," you have stepped into a role that is a position, right? That in that moment they say, hey, not only does my youth pastor say nice things to me, but all of a sudden there are expectations on me that God can do something, that what I do matters. And then there. So I think there's an affirmation point, like we said to it. I think that it is a good opportunity to fail. So it is a really safe space. If we have mentors and leaders and others that are in the room that are adult leaders, and that student has a job, and they totally bomb it, right? Like they do something wrong, they do whatever. Nobody dies. Nothing, right? Like nothing flies out the window, nobody gets sued. Like it's opportunities for them to say, okay, I'm being trusted with something that I can fail at and try again. And be able to step into that. That if
Definitely.
I am in the back of house running slides, and I forget to hit it because I'm not paying attention, do kids look backwards because they know it's them? Yes, but we're not live streaming this to 40,000 people. It's fine. We're not even live streaming this at all, right? And so it's one of those where I think it's a great opportunity for them to fail. I think one of the things that you can run into, but that is a product and good in the end, is that pride and entitlement side. And I think it's easy for students who get some of these roles to be able to step into them, to be confident in them, and then to be challenged by somebody else, right? You're not the boss of me, you're not whatever this is. And hopefully those structures have been put in place where you have other leaders and other things that are there to combat that. But it can totally happen, right? It can totally happen where there's a high school boy who has a leadership role who's like, do what I say. And they're like, no. And they're like, do what I say. And so you have to combat that a little bit. But again, I think that's an opportunity. So I remember having somebody ask me one time, how do you demand respect? And I was like, well, I think that's the wrong question. You don't demand it. But here's what we can do to respect others. And here's how we can gain that. And you knowing that you're in the middle, right? That you're in this safe ministry space means that you don't even have to deal with that. That you can say, hey, everybody else, this is what we said, but here's an adult that's going to come in. Here's Ty, come on in. Because they don't have to be this absolute authority. And so I think it's just a super safe space to learn and to grow before, yeah, you're messing up slides at big church or, stepping into a role somewhere else. So,
Well, and I think learning how to fail effectively or learning how to fail without absolutely just crumbling
yeah,
under the fact that you did fail is a tremendous learning skill for anybody, because I know some high schoolers that are terrible about it, but I know some 67-year-olds that are still terrible at failing. And so
yeah,
it's one of those things, like, we will fail in life, and so giving them that space, that safe space, and that opportunity to fail is very, very important. And it goes back to one of those things. I For the people that are listening, there's like a little interesting triangle in this whole conversation, because not only was Ty one of my youth kids, but his grandma was my pastor. And so with this, one of the first things, like, I was fresh in the game in youth ministry when your grandma rolled in, and the first thing that she told me was, hey, you are going to mess things up. Tell me before you tell anyone else. And it's just one of those things that was like, it allowed me, and like
ah,
me being the youth pastor, I was part-time, like full-time college student, part-time youth pastor. She was like, look, if you mess up something, which you will, like, there's not any way around it, tell me first. And no kidding, like 2 days after, I had to call her because we had gotten a new oven for our church parsonage for the youth pastor, and we didn't strap it down in the back of a truck, and it fell over and broke and all kinds of stuff. And so it was one of those things, but like that is a very, very efficient life skill regardless of the age. But
yeah,
so giving them opportunities from the high school um age range, like, so they can learn and move on with that life lesson, is super, super important. Very, very good. So there's obviously the big, I guess, the big moment of like student leadership and like them serving in your group, but like, what's the big push for making it outside of your group as well? Because I would say a lot of people really focus on student leadership internally, but I would
mhm,
say that there's a big argument and a big push for student leadership externally as well. Whether that be serving in big church or serving in, for instance, our group, we just finished middle school church camp last week, and I took 3 of my student leaders with me, and they all went and they all served and were small group leaders and everything for the junior high kids, and they're all going to be seniors this year. It's one of those really, really cool things. But how does that look? What is your push for student leaders in your church setting? And then also, how do you kind of push them to not only be a leader in your group, but also as they get older to step up into those leadership roles as a church member?
yeah. No, all of
That
those
was
are
a
great
very
questions.
loaded question. Sorry.
That's great. I'll do the parts I remember and then remind me if I forget. So, yeah, I think one of the things we've primarily been talking about has been roles, which I think is how that naturally plays out. I do think it goes beyond just roles on a weekly basis into a bigger discipleship process, a bigger maybe leadership process in planning long-term ministry and things like that. But we all know that the easiest part, 100%, is like here's roles that they fill that they can step into that are those small steps. And so I think some of that is natural. So we've talked a lot about youth band. It just happens to be a thing at our church that we have a lot of these talented students. And so some of that can come out of necessity. Whenever you have people, this happened a lot for us in COVID, right? That we had to do more technology things. And I happened to have kids who knew technology better than adults. And so for us to be able to step into this and say, hey, we need to create some video content and it needs to be engaging. And me say, okay, well, y'all used to do a children's sermon. So how about we recruit youth? We step in and we create fun videos and utilize some of them and be able to create content and utilize them to create content that the whole church is going to see. It just happens to be a Sunday school lesson, or I mean, not Sunday school, like kids church, not even kids church, children's sermon time. That's what I mean. And so there's little things like that. There's being able to be a rotation on worship teams and things like that. And a lot of times people just don't know, right? Youth ministry can be very isolated. We're literally in the basement, and the basement's really nice, but it's the basement. And so being able to communicate to your staff, I think, about wins. So if you have a staff meeting, or if you're talking to your worship pastor, or you're talking to different staff, man, I have this kid who is killing it in this, right? I have a kid who I swear plays guitar better than anybody I've met. Like things like that, whether that sounds over dramatic, helps the rest of the church and the rest of the staff to be able to know these things. If you get to and everybody has a different one, but like church council, or whatever leadership team meetings you have to attend, or things like that, being able to take 3 minutes and share those wins, and tell some of those stories, I think helps people to say, hey, it's not just kids down there being crazy and it's babysitting. There's ministry happening, and I didn't know that it was happening, not only by the guy that we're paying, or the girl that we're paying, or whoever. And so, I think communicating, sharing stories, helping to create those opportunities for students is the biggest thing, because I think it's really rare a lot of times for students to be able to like ask for those, maybe to get any of those kind of things. I think outside of that, creating a culture, and this is something we've done to an extent, but I would love to do more, of having a youth ministry aspect to all of your ministries. So in children's ministry, that looks like having people who are there to help in different roles, help with camps, different things like that. In youth, we've talked about that and what that can look like. But then even moving forward, if you have a greeters team, if you have a worship team, whatever teams your church has developed, whatever things your church does in missions elements and any of that, being able to say, hey, are there people who fit in those teams? Are there opportunities for those to be able to happen together? I think are all just huge wins, because when we step into multi-generational ministry and it happens well, then I think the whole church wins. And so that may be on you a little bit more than the students to help create those opportunities and create those systems. But I think when we can create those opportunities, it's absolutely huge. And so, yeah, have the conversations, tell the stories. If they shoot you down, then that's their loss. But
yeah, I mean, it's really, really, I think sometimes we overlook it. I would say on any given Sunday, we have probably 5 to 7 youth helping in some aspect. We have high school students that literally lead children's church groups. We have students that are on the worship team. We have students that are greeters. We have students in and out everywhere. And the thing is it's not a hard deal, but also we got to understand. And I think sometimes, especially churches, kind of lose sight of this. We all are the church. Yeah. And sometimes we act like the youth ministry is like, oh, well, you'll get there in a few more years when you get old enough, kind of thing like that. And it's like, no, like not only can they serve effectively now, they have ideas that are going to reach the people that are closer to their age than others would. And so having those opportunities for them to be involved, including their say. I love that y'all had videos and y'all did the content creating and like got youth involved in that. That's super, super cool. We did a virtual VBS, and my associate youth pastor, which is 23 now, was the youngest person that we got ideas from. And it was like, it's all well and good, but like, I think we kind of missed a mark there as well, because like we could have had some younger voices in there too and been like, hey, that doesn't sound as cool as y'all think it does, or something to that nature. Just the mindset of like, they are a little closer to that age, or they have siblings, which is a super important thing, that are that age. And so just having that involvement, having that mindset, just having that contribution of them saying, my little brother would never watch that, or I mean, however that plays out, but it just gives them opportunities to also understand that the fact is they don't have to leave the church when they leave high school. And I think that's one of the biggest things that we have to really, really nail down. Otherwise, kids graduate and they're like, well, what's next? Where do I go now? And so very, very important. So for pastors, and this is kind of the question to kind of close us out. For pastors that are currently struggling with building a student leadership team, or maybe they're fresh in the gate, just started at a church, and this is something that they're like, hey, I see the importance of this, but like, I don't really know where to begin. What would you recommend to them as they start, I guess, taking a step towards having that student leadership team? And then just anything else as far as keeping it up and maybe like bringing help on to identify leaders, anything and everything that you have.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the things, and kind of feeding all the way back from that very beginning conversation of just keeping your eyes open, is to continually do that. I think one of the goals in student ministry and in discipleship in general is that as you engage people where they are, that you are thinking about where they can be. And we can't engage students only for where they can be, because they're where they are right then in the middle of trying to figure out who they are and all the things. And so we have to be present with them. But I think having that and allowing students to step into that and stepping into that process continues to be good. I think bringing other adults into the mix. So as you have students who begin to show up in leadership, are you not only engaging with them, but are there other volunteers that they're connecting to? Are there other people that are discipling them and that they're stepping into? I think that's huge, that your student leaders are being discipled, are being poured into, and have somebody that is older than them that is talking to them and engaging them. I think as far as creating teams, I think that's great if you want to create a official list. Like I said, I'm working right now on the systems side of that. So being able to say, okay, I see leaders in my group. I've affirmed or stepped in a little bit to help them maybe see where they can go and what they can do. A next step may be, okay, I'm going to create a list right here that says what are roles, and exactly like you said earlier, on this ascending kind of platform, right? All the way from big roles and leading a group all the way down to little roles. And how can I build those out and begin to assign them and begin to do that? I think those structures are really, really great. And then continue to have these conversations. The fact that this is the third one of these that y'all have talked about on student leadership, I think makes this podcast pretty great resource. But then also, I'm sure there's a million other resources too to be able to help maybe give voice or give structures to some of those things. But for me, it really is the back of my mind that, am I thinking about it? And my pastor has a phrase that I think is real. And he says the tyranny of the urgent. And I think we've got to get to a point in planning and vision casting and all of that, that we're able to do ministry outside of the tyranny of the urgent. That I'm not just there because something needs to be said about Romans this week, right? Or because of whatever, but that we're able to kind of have a big perspective, a large perspective as we do pray or read Romans or talk about the week, whatever. So
sure. Yeah, I know, without a doubt, all great recommendations. And there are definitely some resources out there. I would encourage you to hop into the Facebook groups. There is 100 different Facebook groups out there with different youth pastors. You can find youth pastor groups that are specific for your denomination, specific for your state, specific just across the board youth ministry. I mean, however and whatever, there's so many different ones out there. Just get on Facebook and search youth ministry, and you'll find some groups, because there's a ton of them. And that's another opportunity just to kind of bounce ideas off of other people. And it really, really helps out in the long run when you do have that person that you can kind of throw ideas at, and they're honest enough with you to be like, no, that doesn't need to happen. Or they'll be like, that's a really cool idea. So having those people around you, especially even with student leadership, like especially as you're building the foundations and putting it all together, having someone to throw those ideas off of is super, super important. Preferably someone that has already had skill or had experience in doing that.
Yeah.
because they're going to have a model that worked for them. It might not be the same for you, but at least it's some groundwork that you can start with.
Yeah.
So awesome conversation. Ty, other than that, how can people connect with you on social media if they want to reach out to you? Do you have a shameless plug about anything that you're doing? Anything like that? This is your time to shine.
Awesome. So I've scaled back so you can see great pictures of my baby on Instagram. But outside of that, basically Facebook is the only place I really hang out. Yeah, if you go to church, First Methodist Midland, to my church website, obviously my email will be there. If you have questions or thoughts or any of that, I am a super open person. So yeah, shoot it to me, ask me questions, let me know. Would love to be able to communicate. And just like you just said, those Facebook groups, I mean, I think we learn together, and those groups are a safe place to fail usually too. And so I love that, and definitely that. And then really, as far as big things that we're doing, I think have been really excited just in the life of our church to be able to step into maybe unofficial roles of just how the church can grow and step into what's next. And so I think we'll just give some encouragement to leaders kind of as we finish up, to have a voice. Every church coming out of COVID, and should have always been doing this, but coming out of COVID, is having to ask themselves, who are we? What are we doing? Where are we going? Because church, while it's the same God and while it's the same everything else, is transitioning. And the more that we who live in both worlds with the adults and ministry and the students in ministry, I think can give voice to that and can aid in those transitions, the better. And so I think that's a big thing for me, is just trying to live in that and to help the church be who it needs to be. So.
Yeah, definitely. That's awesome. Great advice for anybody that's out there listening. And that pretty much ends it though, man. Thank you for being on the show. Thank you for contributing to such a timeless conversation. I feel like this is going to be one of those conversations that always happens in youth ministry, which is why we really don't care about doing it multiple times. We try to branch out maybe 6 months or so in between each episode. But it is a very, very timeless conversation, and it's something that leaders are always looking for ideas and resources on how to get this started. So thank you for contributing to that. Thank you for being a part of the show. And man, just thank you for taking time. And for everybody listening, we will see you guys next week. Y'all have a great week.